last time I checked, I hadn't heard a conversation with fathers anywhere, especially a group of black fathers that was being broadcast. But first, let me introduce these gentlemen, and I'm gonna go from youngest to oldest, so then we can give the elder in the room his due honor and respect. A gentleman who I think all of us are connected to here in the studio. So first, I have in the studio my brother, Quentin Harris. Good morning, bro.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, man. I'm well. And he's not just my brother, but Quentin is also an educator. He also is an expert in athletics. So I'll let you share just a little bit of what you do.
So I work with young people. I've worked in education over the last 10 years, working mainly with K through 8, working with special needs children. Now I currently work with a company called the Academy Group. There we work with young people to unlock their talent, ultimately. We give them experiences that they probably wouldn't be afforded anywhere else due to the lack within the community. And so what we do is we try to broaden those horizons for them based on their interests. And so I really enjoy that work. It was a step up for me from working with education because of the fact that you don't have as much autonomy as you would like to give the kids what they need. And I have all the resources I need with the Academy Group to give the kids what they need.
Phenomenal. And you're working with our young man on a regular basis.
That's correct.
Okay, because I know the series I've been teaching or sharing is Lessons to Teach My Son. We'll come back around to that in a moment. But Quentin Harris, everybody in the studio this morning, my brother. So, of course, there's some affinity there. And he was a father before me. So a lot of what I learned going into fatherhood was, hey, bro, what about this? Hey, bro, what about that? Right, in terms of taking care of a very young baby and a toddler. So much love to you. Happy Father's Day, bro.
Thank you. Same to you.
All right. The next gentleman I'm going to introduce is Joshua Morris. Joshua Morris in the studio this morning. Now, Josh is a longtime friend. I mean, we've been knowing each other all our life. Yeah. Went to college together. Roommates. Yeah. Wow. Josh was there when I got kicked out. When I got kicked out of college, this is the guy I left behind. And then Josh left school, went to the armed forces, military, and now is in law enforcement, but also is a therapist and is working with people in terms of what they need to deal with trauma, emotional trauma, and doing a lot of phenomenal work with law enforcement officers. But Josh, anything you would add to that?
No, just I want to say thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be here. I wanted to thank you for the work you've been doing and inspiring and coaching others. I personally have been inspired, empowered by the work you've been doing myself.
Thank you, bro.
And you already hit on one of the points I wanted to mention, so I wanted to say just a shout out and thank you to you for being courageous in your coaching, transparent in your teaching, and gracious in your giving. And already you were showing transparency just now, just talking about one of maybe some things that some people might not put out there about a setback early on.
Yeah.
But the old preachers used to say, a setback is nothing but a setup for a comeback.
Man,
so
there you go. Breakdowns lead to breakthroughs.
Know what I mean? And that's what you are, a living testament of that. So I'm thankful for God, for you, and for our relationship. I just, of course, already said Happy Father's Day to the co-fathers. And lastly, I just want to say Happy Father's Day to my patriarchs, my biological father, my father-in-law.
Absolutely.
And Pastor Reed. So
all right.
for a good show.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to be great. All right. And then the last gentleman in the studio, James Larry. Now, let me say a few things about James Larry real quick. Because one of the questions I'm going to ask the men in the studio, the fathers in the studio this morning is, what is one of the fondest memories that you've had of your father? Matter of fact, that's going to be the next big question that I ask, right? We're going to kick it off that way. And one of the fondest memories I have of my dad actually includes you.
Okay.
And that was, I don't know if you remember, you took your sons. My father took my brother and I, Ethan, not Quentin. Right. Quentin wasn't born, or he was a baby.
Okay.
All right. And then my two cousins, Kenny and LeVar, we went down to Springfield, Illinois,
yes,
We checked out the Capitol. We did some camping. We were out in nature. Right. And one of the fondest memories I have of my father is on that trip, like spending time with him. But you were there as well, being a father.
That's right.
And when I thought about it, I said, wow, man, James Larry was there too.
Right.
How about that?
Yes, sir.
And when I was thinking of a father, mature father that I wanted to have on the show, I wanted to make sure that we represented grandfathers.
Okay.
Because that's a huge role that patriarch men play in our community as well, right? The grandfather.
Yes, sir.
And I was thinking about fathers, and you popped into my mind. I said, who better to have, especially a man where one of the fondest memories I have of my father, you were there.
Wow.
And you were a part of that.
Yes.
So James Larry, man, powerful man, father of 7.
8.
Father of 8.
Yes.
Okay, father of 8.
Yes.
Grandfather of how many?
11.
11.
Yes.
Grandfather of 11.
Right.
And still very connected to his family.
Yes.
Matter of fact, I was having a conversation with your daughter on Friday. Nothing but good things to say.
Okay. Wow.
You know, nothing but good things to say about her father.
Awesome.
And I thought, man, if we're going to have a father in the studio, why not have somebody who I think the three of us, Joshua, Quinn, and myself, aspire to be as a father one day. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. Like Joshua said, I'm privileged to be on your show this morning. You know, I've known all you guys since day one. You know, literally, it's not, well, we met. I've known you since you came home from the hospital.
That's right. That's right.
You know, the times that you've spent over to me and my wife's house, and our children have spent time over your folks' house, and it's just it takes a village.
Yeah.
And that's what it was back in those days. It took a village. Me and your dad. We made many trips together, fishing trips.
Yep.
And one of my nicest pictures that I have is when you were maybe 2 years old, and I caught a picture of you and I just kind of standing together. Your dad wasn't there, your mom, you know, they were in the place, but the picture is just me and you. And I have quite a few pictures just like that of you guys coming up. You know?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm just privileged to be here to share what little knowledge that I have on raising a family. You know, it's been a joy to do it, and again, I'm thankful to be on your show this morning.
I can't wait for us to get into just the questions and even the calls that may come and learning from you this morning. So thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
What is one of the fondest memories you have of your dad? Like when you think about your father, what's a fond memory that you can recall?
Well, you know, I hate to break in like this, but my dad coming up, my dad wasn't in our lives when I was young. By the time I was 12 years old, my dad had divorced my mom, and my mom had remarried. But I'm going to just be a straight shooter. You know, sometimes they say, well, you know, my dad was gone and, you know, our lives was miserable. My dad left. And everything got good.
How about that?
Everything, because, you know, he was not that kind of father that was a loving father and the kind of father that took the time with his children. And so as far as growing up, I didn't have that kind of relationship with my dad. But it inspired me to become a better father.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. You know, the example that he put forth was one, I would tell myself, I do not want to be like my dad.
Wow.
And my wife, she's kind of funny. Anytime she wanted to hurt my feelings, she'd say, oh, you're being just like your dad. Wait a minute.
I got to change up.
Don't say that.
Change up. Right.
So, but what happened in later years when my father got elderly, it just so happened that I moved about a mile from where he lived.
Wow.
He was in his 70s and I was in my 40s. And as he got older, he could do less for himself. And so I stepped in, and I would take him to the bank. You know, when he got his little Social Security check, I would run his errands. I would make sure that all the things that was necessary to run his household was done. I had other brothers and sisters, and they were like, oh, no, I ain't dealing with this dude. He treated us bad.
Right.
But my mom had passed, and I thought about it. I said, what would my mom want me to do in this situation? And my mom, I knew my mom would say, take care of your father. And that's what I did. I took care of him up until the time he passed.
Well, you honored him as your father.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. So if I had any fondest memories, it'd be those last years of his life when I was taking him back and forth to the bank, to the grocery store, and things like that.
Got it.
Yep.
Did you learn anything from him directly, observed or taught during those last few years of his life?
I realized that he was regretful for the things that he did. He was sorry, in his own way.
Right.
He apologized. And so, if anything, I learned that, people can change. People can, even though they were mean and ornery early on, sometimes they get a little older, they can change. So
would you say that if there's a father listening right now, and maybe, he caught this broadcast and already, there's some emotion for him because he knows he's not showing up for his children the way that he should. What would your words be to him listening right now?
I would say dig in. I'd say, apologize.
Yeah.
And if they don't accept the first apology, give them a second one. However many it takes to reach back out to that child. Sometimes you've done wrong. And if you've done wrong, don't try to justify it. Just apologize and be there for your son. And each time you say, well, Dad, you did me wrong. You know what, son? I'm sorry. What can I do to make it better?
Got it.
As a father, that's what I would suggest.
And one of the words you use that I know that many of us are trying to avoid in life is regret. Regret. And I think anybody, a young father who's listening or a father who still has an opportunity to insert himself back into the life of his children or child, what you said there, I don't think any of us want to have regret.
Right.
And that was still, there was some regret. So thank you for that. Thank you for that vulnerability.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So Joshua, what about you, man?
Father?
Yeah, fondest memory of your dad. And by the way, we all know your dad.
Yes,
is he listening this morning?
I don't know. I made a call to let him know about it.
Isn't he?
No, they're back here now.
They're back here? Okay,
But
okay.
yeah, you know how they do.
Right.
So I don't know if they get up pretty early though. I think they get up about 3 or 4 in the morning, so they may be up. If you're up, happy Father's Day, Dad. Yeah, a few things. I would say probably at the top of the list is tying in what Brother Larry said is his humility. One of my most fondest memories would be the times that he actually apologized to me personally.
Wow.
For, mistakes he made. That is a very particular one, you know what I'm saying, that comes to mind that happened where, if I'm not mistaken, I think he got on his knees and apologized to me.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
And those things
like as a show of I'm truly sorry.
Yeah, humility,
truly
right?
sorry.
Like, son, I'm at your feet. I'm your father, and I messed up. I made a mistake. Please forgive me. And I would say, being a therapist and dealing with children and trauma and things like that, one of the most powerful things that can mitigate trauma is your ability to repair properly.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So that's one of the things. That's probably one of the biggest lessons I learned from him. Another fond memory would be he took me shopping for my first suit for my first big job. Wow. I didn't have the money to buy it. And this is probably something a lot of black men can't say, and it was meaningful. And I cherish that suit to this day. I got a good job because of wearing that suit as an interview. And it was like, wow, my dad's kind of like my send-off, if you would, my black bar mitzvah. You know what I'm saying? So later, I was older by the time that happened, wasn't 12. But, so that's probably another memory. And the last one I'll probably want to mention is showing me how to tie a necktie. I watched my dad tie many neckties, so I know how to tie at least 3 different types of knots. Okay. And it's interesting because over the years, I've had the privilege of being in a lot of, occasions where you wear a necktie, and I'm showing other men and young men how to tie ties because they don't know how to tie a tie. They're not looking crooked or whatever. Right. And many times I would think about the fact that, wow, your dad taught you this. So every time I tie a necktie is really a time. It's a powerful moment for me to reflect on the power of a father. That?
Beautiful, beautiful. Quentin.
So 3 things, 3 different times come to mind. And with my father, it was he had a routine that was set in stone, and a lot of times it'd be tough to get a hold of him. And I remember coming up, man, there was one thing I really wanted to do over in Westchester, right off of Cermak and Manheim. There was this bike trail. And, you know, I could only ride my bike up and down the street around the block with the kids in the neighborhood. But, you know, I wanted to open it up and get on this bike trail, right?
It out.
And so, you know, summers would go by and I'm like, Dad, you know, we got to hit this bike trail. You take me to this bike trail. And, you know, it'd be summers that would go by and it wouldn't happen. And there was one summer, I was probably between 9 and 11, somewhere in that age group. So I remember my sisters being there. He took me, but he took my sisters as well, right? And so I was just kind of like, we couldn't hit the whole trail. And I'm like, you know, and I was like, Dad, you know, I really want us just to go. I want to be able to finish this whole trail. And later on that summer, he did take me. And I just remember the pride of like riding my bike with my dad, right?
Wow.
And then another one was same type of situation. I used to play ball on Wednesday nights with kids when I was in middle school. It was called gym night. Every Wednesday night, we would go to this school and we would play ball. I always wanted my father to come. He would just drop me off, you know, come back, pick me up. My mom would drop me off. But other kids' dads would come and play with him. I'm like, man, I want my father to come. And so, you know, I did gym night for years, but it was that one time he did come, and I held on to that. And the last one was when he met my son. He wasn't able to meet him right away. I think Wesley was probably about 9 months when my father met him, but we took him to Al's Grill over in Oak Park, and you know, just to have in that one place and one time, 3 generations, was powerful for me.
We got pictures of that. I remember that. Yeah.
So those are the 3 fondest memories.
Awesome. Well, good stuff, man. Again, happy Father's Day, gentlemen. I'm excited to have you all.
Happy Father's Day to you too, bro.
Likewise.
Thank you. And man, it's a joy to be a father.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, speaking of the joy of fatherhood, what lessons have you all learned from being dads? Because let me tell you, so my son is going to turn 2 this upcoming week. He turns 2 on Wednesday or Thursday? Wednesday. He turns 2 on Wednesday. So 2 years in my life, and he's taught me. I mean, I'm you know, the series I'm doing is lessons to teach my son. The next series should be lessons my son has taught me about me, right? So I'm curious, you know, for your children, because I know me and Quentin, we both have boys. Brother Larry, you have 8 children, and how many boys?
5.
And 3 girls.
3 girls, that's right.
So you got both.
Yes.
You have both, and so I'm sure you've learned lessons in,
Absolutely.
I mean, many different ways about fathering a daughter. I want to hear some of that.
Okay.
But if you could kind of isolate the one top lesson that you've learned from being a father, what would you say that lesson is? And whoever you know it comes up for, you know, just share it. Okay. But top lesson.
I can go. Okay. I think for me, I had to understand that there is no perfect process in fathering, and that, especially for me, you can get all the advice in the world, but this is my first time going through it, and I had to accept the challenge of, hey, you know, you can't be this perfect dad. You know what I mean? You have to accept your mistakes and learn from them. There was a particular time where I saw a transition in Wesley's development, and part of me, I was sitting there and I was just watching. I'm like, wow, when did he learn how to do this? Yeah. And I kind of inside, I broke down a little bit because I was like, I felt like I missed something. You know, I'm like, man, am I running around too much? Am I too busy? Like, am I being there enough? Am I giving him what he need? And I kind of had to just sit back and be like, you know what? You're doing everything that you know how to within your power. Right. Your son loves you, you know, and there is no perfect process. You just have to continue to learn.
Exactly.
Continue to learn.
Absolutely.
And so that's been the biggest lesson, I think, for me over these 3 years.
Got it. Got it.
Powerful.
You know, I'm in agreement with what Quentin just said, and my oldest son is 47 years old, and my baby boy is 24, but I'm still learning. Even at a child of my son 47, I'm still learning. The number one thing I'm learning is to be patient, you know, to kind of wait things out. As men, some of us have a tendency to, hey, let's get the job done. Let's rush through this. You know, we ain't got time to play around. Right. But my children have taught me to be patient. You know, sometimes we're doing I've learned to listen to them more. Sometimes we may be moving a couch or something or a table through a door, and say, okay, we're doing it this way. And my son may say, no, Dad, why don't you try to taking the door this way. Now, a lot of times I know I say, this ain't going to work what they saying, but I've learned to say, okay, let's try it your way. You know what I mean? And so sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. But at least I know I've taken the humble side in this matter and listened to him rather than just saying, no, you don't know anything. Let me go ahead and do this. I've been moving couches for 40 years. You know what I mean? But I learned, okay, we'll try it your way. So that takes patience to make that happen. So I've really learned a lot of patience with my children.
Wow. What about you?
I agree with Brother Larry. Patience, you know, for sure. And I'd say one of the things that I'm learning from them is that I have a lot of room for improvement and growth in my character and in my leadership ability. You know, and you know, because I'm teaching them things I've learned that it took me maybe 35 years to learn what I'm teaching them, and they're learning it now at 10 and 9. And now they're holding me accountable to it quick. And it's like, hey, I just learned this a couple years ago. I need you to slow down. They're already like, hey, Daddy, well, you said we should eat more carrots. Why are you getting an extra donut or whatever? It's like, I'm like, oh man, okay, is this how you know? And you know, so I'm learning how to brace the mirroring part, if you will, and use it to help challenge myself. So like allowing them to hold me accountable in a respectful way. They still need to stay in, understand their place, but allowing them to be able to see into my life and speak into my life and push me further, because I think my personal growth is going to help me be a better parent them continually.
Absolutely. Wonderful. I know for me, my son is not even 2. He'll be 2 Wednesday, like I said.
Terrible twos.
But here's the thing. I see myself in him.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the piece I think that is like, that's the biggest lesson when you actually see characteristics. I was watching Kanye West, his interview with David Letterman. He called it genetic coding. He was like, yeah, me going up to grab a mic is nothing but genetic coding from my father. My father did stuff like that. Wow. I was like, wow. Right? Yeah. And so now I'm watching my son and I see him doing certain things and I'm like, do I do that? Like, is that what that looks like? When I do that, right? It's like, oh man. And then of course, my wife would say, that's you. Right? And but you're looking at that characteristic or that way of being from a completely different perspective now. Because when you're doing it, it's completely justified. Right? But then when you see your child doing it, you like, I gotta work on that. Because I'm going to have to father him on that. And he's going to look at me and say, man, you do this. Right? I see you do this. And so that's one of the biggest lessons I'm learning now. And then the other one is consistency.
Okay.
It's consistency because who I am for him, the ability to be consistent with that has everything to do with how I'm stewarding him as a father. And so that's showing me other areas of life where I'm inconsistent. So consistency is also the other thing that I'm really learning from my son, how to be consistent, and to see the areas of life where I'm not consistent. What lessons have you all learned from being dads? Because let me tell you, so my son is going to turn 2 this upcoming week. He turns 2 on Wednesday or Thursday? Wednesday. He turns 2 on Wednesday. So 2 years in my life, and he's taught me. I mean, I'm the series I'm doing is lessons to teach my son. The next series should be lessons my son has taught me about me, right? So I'm curious, for your children, because I know me and Quentin, we both have boys. Brother Larry, you have 8 children, and how many boys?
5.
And 3 girls.
3 girls, that's right.
So you got both.
Yes.
You have both. And so I'm sure you've learned lessons in,
absolutely,
many different ways about fathering a daughter. I want to hear some of that.
Okay.
But if you could kind of isolate the one top lesson that you've learned from being a father, what would you say that lesson is? And whoever it comes up for, to share it. Okay. But top lesson.
I can go. Okay. I think for me, I had to understand that there is no perfect process in fathering, and that, especially for me, you can get all the advice in the world, but this is my first time going through it, and I had to accept the challenge of, hey, you can't be this perfect dad You know what I mean? You have to accept your mistakes and learn from them. There was a particular time where I saw a transition in Wesley's development. And part of me, I was sitting there and I was just watching. I'm like, wow, when did he learn how to do this? Yeah. And I kind of inside, I broke down a little bit because I was like, I felt like I missed something. You know, I'm like, man, am I running around too much? Am I too busy? Like, am I being there enough? Am I giving him what he need? And I kind of had to just sit back and be like, you know what? You doing everything that you know how to within your power. Right. Your son loves you, you know, and there is no perfect process. You just have to continue to learn, continue to learn.
Absolutely.
And so that's been the biggest lesson, I think, for me over these 3 years.
Got it. It's
powerful.
You know, I'm in agreement with what Quentin just said, and my oldest son is 47 years old, and my baby boy is 24, but I'm still learning. Even at a child of my son 47, I'm still learning. The number one thing I'm learning is to be patient, you know, to kind of wait things out. As men, some of us have a tendency to, hey, let's get the job done. Let's rush through this. You know, we ain't got time to play around. Right. But my children have taught me to be patient. You know, sometimes we're doing I've learned to listen to them more. Sometimes we may be moving a couch or something or a table through a door, and let's say, okay, we're doing it this way. And my son may say, no, Dad, why don't you try to taking in the door this way. Now, a lot of times I know I say, this ain't going to work what they saying, but I've learned to say, okay, let's try it your way. You know what I mean? And so sometimes it works, sometimes it don't, but at least I know I've taken the humble side in this matter and listened to him rather than just saying, no, you don't know anything. Let me go ahead and do this. I've been moving couches for 40 years. You know what I mean? But I learned, okay, we'll try it your way. So that takes patience to make that happen. So I've really learned a lot of patience with my children.
Wow. What about you?
I agree with Brother Larry. Patience, you know, for sure. And I'd say one of the things that I'm learning from them is that I have a lot of room for improvement and growth in my character and in my leadership ability, you know? And, you know, because I'm teaching them things I've learned that it took me maybe 35 years to learn what I'm teaching them. Yeah. And they're learning it now at 10 and 9. And now they're holding me accountable to it quick. And it's like, hey, I just learned this a couple years ago. I need you to slow down. They're already like, hey, Daddy, well, you said we should eat more carrots. Why are you getting extra donut or whatever? It's like, I'm like, oh man, okay, is this how you know? And you know, so I'm learning how to brace the mirroring part, if you will, and use it to help challenge myself. So like allowing them to hold me accountable in a respectful way. They still need to stay in, understand their place, but allowing them to be able to see into my life and speak into my life and push me further, because I think my personal growth is going to help me be a better parent them continually.
Absolutely. Wonderful. I know for me, my son is not even 2. He'll be 2 Wednesday, like I said.
Terrible 2s.
But here's the thing. I see myself in him.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the piece I think that is like, that's the biggest lesson. When you actually see characteristics, I was watching Kanye West, his interview with David Letterman. He called it genetic coding. He was like, yeah, me going up to grab a mic is nothing but genetic coding from my father. My father did stuff like that. And I was like, wow. Right? Yeah. And so now I'm watching my son, and I see him doing certain things, and I'm like, do I do that? Like, is that what that looks like when I do that? Right? It's like, oh man. And then of course, my wife would say, that's you. Right? And but you're looking at that characteristic or that way of being from a completely different perspective now. Because when you're doing it, it's completely justified. Right? But then when you see your child doing it, you like, I got to work on that. Because I'm going to have to father him on that. And he's going to look at me and say, man, you do this. Right? I see you do this. And so that's one of the biggest lessons I'm learning now. And then the other one is consistency. Okay. It's consistency because who I am for him, the ability to be consistent with that has everything to do with how I'm stewarding him as a father. And so that's showing me other areas of life where I'm inconsistent. So consistency is also the other thing that I'm really learning from my son, how to be consistent and to see the areas of life where I'm not consistent. What would you all say is the biggest challenge of fatherhood?
Well, to me, the biggest challenge of fatherhood is watching your children suffer. I mean, if I could use that as a challenge, and that's from cradle to the grave. You know, you hate to see your children sick when you can't do anything about it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, what can I do?
Yeah.
We've given Pedialyte. You know, we've given Kitty Tylenol.
That's real.
Yeah,
that's real.
and see, I'm gonna tell you guys something. It don't get any easier as they get older when you're a father in your child's life. The hurt may not be the same. Maybe it's a relationship they were involved in that didn't turn out like you thought it should turn out. You know, or just anything. Maybe they're out of work and can't get a job right now, and you see them hurting, and you're hurting, and you're trying to do everything you can. You say, well, maybe if you get a haircut, or maybe if you get a new suit, or you're doing everything you can to. So that, to me, is the greatest challenge of fatherhood.
Wow.
To see your child suffering, and there's really
nothing you can
do about it.
Wow. And I don't know that we've gotten there. I mean, Joshua.
Yeah, I've had a couple of encounters. Now that you've said it, because I definitely put that at the top of the list because my son had to go. I know 2 separate occasions he had to go in the hospital for some serious situations. One was he had pneumonia, I think, and we talking about a baby, and then the other one was he had to actually have surgery real early on. Yeah. And man, you know, it's like I remember him going into surgery with the doctor, and I'm thinking, and it just, you know, and when the surgery went wonderful, the doctor was fine, and you know what I mean. And I just remember just wanting to get a doctor hug, like, because there was nothing I could do to help my son. But you know, and I'm like, man, doc, take care of him. That's my son, man. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you know, being helpless, like if that doctor can't help him, I can't do anything about it. So it's a very, very vulnerable position to be in. You know, so I had one other thing I had put on my list as far as that was challenging for me is keeping pace and staying ahead of my children's developmental needs as they change. Kind of like what you were talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because he was talking about how they're different stages and that you got to have different relationships with them. So same thing with me.
How old are your children?
My daughter is 10 now. I'm sorry, I apologize. She turned 11.
Oh, she will get, boy, you be in trouble. She listening right now. She's like, Daddy, I'm 11.
If you listen, love you, princess. And my son, he turned 10. So 10 and 11 now. And you know, but they're different. And so I've got to parent them different. I have to make sure. And then especially in the younger years, their developmental stages change rapidly. You know, you went from, you know what I mean, you got your terrible twos, next thing you know, you got your school age. Right. And you got to treat a school age child a little bit different. You got to start giving them more, you know, and then once they get into preteen, there's different ways you got to handle them and on and on. So stand ahead of that curve and being aware of what those new needs are going to be and being prepared to step in and meet them in an adequate way. That's something that for me is a challenge.
Got it.
I definitely agree with that. Mine is along the same lines. And coming back to the suffering part, Wesley spent 48 hours. It was about 36 to 48 hours in the hospital. He had RSV. He wasn't getting enough air. And talk about getting that phone call at work. And, you know, I'm in the middle of teaching the class, you know. The wife called the phone a couple of times, you know, so I'm like, okay, you know, more than once, it means something going on. So, you know, we had already knew coming in that there was something going on, so I'm going to go get him checked out. And so they're like, oh, he has to be admitted right away. So, you know, I'm like lightweight panicking at work. So, you know, I call the principal and let them know what's going on. So, you know, I go to the hospital. I'm like, all right, you know, what's going on? They're good. I run home, grab some things, bring it back, and talk about powerless, you know, and just weak. You know, as a man, that's tough. You know, to be in a position where your child, your seed's fate is in the hands of somebody else and God. You know what I mean? And so that is tough for me. I think one of the challenges is understanding that the decisions that you make, ultimately for your child, will have the trickle effect and will affect him. He has no control over that. And so, like, for example, I'm faced with the situation now of Wesley's getting ready to go to preschool. Do I keep him in the same location he's in? Do I put him somewhere else?
Yeah.
He has a September 22nd birthday, which, that cuts him off from that September 1st school date, to where, like, do I get him tested and try to put him in a school anyway, or do I give him an extra year?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Because, boys develop a little bit slower. Right. And so it's like, giving him that extra year not only could make him more competitive, but then, like, do I push him and say, hey, that's what happened with me. I started kindergarten just after 4.
Okay.
But when I got out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
And so, very smart, but I did not have direction. So you have to really think about those things and make intentional decisions for your child, and understanding that it's going to affect them some way or the other. I have to consider what type of kids am I putting my child around? You know what I mean? Like, okay, what is this program going to offer my child? You have to think about all of those things. And if you're not intentional about that, your child will become a product of whatever environment you just allowed them to be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Sir.
So I'll say the challenge for me, I'm an entrepreneur. And so I write my schedule. And I would say the biggest challenge for me is, as a provider for my family, is knowing when to say yes to spending time with him and my wife. Like, because my wife, she takes Fridays off and she spends that day with Legend. And for me, I'm looking at what I have on my plate, and I'm like, I can't. I want to, but I can't do that and be responsible. So there's always this thing going through my mind, like, man, are you missing out? Yeah. Are you making the right decision? But then at the same time, it's like, but you also have this responsibility to take care of your family and to make sure that you're being responsible and that money's coming into the house and that, all these things for him will be handled. So I can't necessarily go play. I can't necessarily just run to the zoo with you right now. And I do, I feel like I get adequate time with him, but it's always this tug of war. Everything else you guys said, I'm not piling on. Absolutely, 100%. But then the other thing for me is that tug of war. And it's interesting because I believe if I had if I had a job and it was required, man, look, 9 to 5, you got to be here. It just wouldn't be a struggle, right? But because my work isn't structured that way, there's always this conversation in my mind of, can you or should you, or can I be over there? Can I create it that way? Are you really showing up the way you should? And so that's one of the major challenges that I have.
Can I make a comment to that?
Yep, absolutely.
One of the things I tell my clients and even myself is the idea is, if you wear a lot of different hats.
Yep.
For me, what I tell myself is, I don't want to fail in the same role every day. So I want to fail in different roles per day.
Right.
So maybe I didn't meet my fatherly quota for today.
Right. Yeah.
But I met my work quota.
Yep.
I met my provider quota. And tomorrow I'll meet my emotionally fatherly quota.
There you go.
So I just don't want to fail in the same area consistently.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that's one of the things I believe that helps me cope. Is then, for instance, yesterday, we spent the whole day together, right? Outside of me going to get my hair cut, I was with him the whole day, and then we all went to dinner as a family. But it was me and him, and we had a good time. Went to the park with Wesley and Quentin, and hung out, wrestled, and do the things that we do when Mama's not around. Because otherwise, Mama's like, y'all getting too rough. Right. I've heard that. You gonna hurt him as he's he can't hardly breathe with laughter. He don't look hurt to me.
Right.
And that's kind of funny because moms is always concerned about their children, and you hurting them. And even when they're grown, moms are still the same way. Sometimes I have to wait till mom leave before I tell my 40-year-old son, hey, look, man, you're doing that the wrong way.
Right.
So if I tell him with mom, there have been times I've talked to my children and my wife is eating, and she'll stop with the spoon, won't even put the spoon in her mouth until I finish the conversation. She's like locked in that I don't want you to hurt my 40-year-old child.
Right. I don't want you hurting his feelings. I don't want you. Yeah.
None of that.
Right.
So that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
That's wisdom right there.
Yeah. It is. He's like, I'll just wait till she
I'll wait till she gone.
I'll wait till she gone. I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say.
I'm gonna say what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. Which is the role of a father. Which is the role of a father.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The same. My wife is like, you being too rough. Matter of fact, you told me a story about the relationship that a father has with a son and how that impacts him in terms of his ability to go out into the world and protect himself and protect other people. You recall that story?
Yeah.
You mind sharing that story in the air real quick?
Yeah, no, not at all. It just the idea that just dealing with a client, and the idea with the family was just that the mom was concerned that the son was about 5 or 6, and the father was roughhousing with them. And from her perspective, he was being a little overly aggressive, and the son looked a little terrified in his demeanor, right? So we were talking about it, and it's like, well, how can we find a balance here? So the father was like, look, Josh, I'm trying to get my son to stand up for himself at work. They got bullies in his classroom. And he's, they pushing him around a little bit. So I need to strengthen him up. So, and I was like, well, here, let's find there's a little better, we can find a middle road approach as opposed to just roughhousing too much. Like what Linal said was good. If you're roughhousing and you see smiles on the face, you're in a good space. If he gets terrified and his countenance change and his affect begins to drop, then you probably are starting to go a little bit overboard. And so, what I talked to this dad about was just the idea of, I said, he was a big man himself, right? So I said, doing what like Linal was talking about, roughhousing with your son in a playful way where he can feel safe in the power of your masculinity, that in and of itself and loving him that way will help him build resilience to be able to stand up against bullies. And I've seen that happen and play out in my own son's life. He was about 5 or 6 and in preschool, and he was on a tricycle, and it was only about 5 tricycles, but it's about 15 kids. So, you got to wait and take turns. So he's riding around and he sees a little girl smaller than him that's sheepishly like looking at him going around in circles. And you could tell she's just waiting for him to get done, and other ones are waiting too. So he came up to her and slowed down on the trike and stopped and said, hey, you want to ride? I'm watching from a distance, and I just happened to see it. And she's like, you can see her go, yes. And so he's getting ready to get off and dismount it so she can get on. And as he does, a big boy, like twice the size of my son, just makes a beeline from across the playground to the trike. And you could see he was like, with his size, I'm about to take this trike. And so at the last minute, my son sees him coming, and he just takes all his weight and lays on the trike and says, no. And you see the bigger boy think about it like, I could take you, but I could see he's confident. He ain't going to back down. It's going to be a fight. He tucked his tail and took off, and he gave the trike to the girl. So the idea was that in the face of that, I think just him being loved built resilience in him and confidence to stand up against the bully. Not me necessarily terrorize him. Up until that point, I really hadn't played with him.
And one of the things you shared with me about that example when we were sitting down talking is, so Josh is a big man. How tall are you, Josh?
6'3".
6'3", 200, 240, right? He's a big man. So he's playing with his son, and his son feels safe. So when another boy, even if the boy's bigger than him, comes to do something, he like, well,
right.
Like, I mean, I tussle with my pops. I'm used to playing with a big man. I'm used to tussling with a big man. So like, what's up? You're not about to push me around. And what really got me with that was the power of a love of a father. Like that's because you're playing with your son. That's love. That's intimacy. But that same intimacy and love creates a different level of resilience. I thought that was so powerful, man, in terms of how a young boy will develop and who he will be in the face of bullies.
Absolutely.
What's the greatest joy of being a dad? What would you say is the greatest joy of being a dad?
Well, with me, it's, again, 8 children, 11 grandchildren, just coming together and laughing ourselves silly.
We're
telling,
I can imagine.
The different stories, different ones are telling the stories of growing up in the Larry household and the things that they had to go through, and just laughing ourselves silly with conversation. Barbecues are fantastic.
I love that.
I definitely have a blended family. I have a set of grandchildren that are an African descent. another set of grandchildren of German descent. So just that combined family like that is crazy. And we have a wonderful time when they mention, hey, we going to Granny's house. They, hey, let's go. We're gonna have a great time. So just laughing ourselves silly is
that's awesome. I'll tell you, growing up, the Larry house was always fun. Yeah, it was always a lot of fun at the Larry house growing up. Yeah. And by the way, that's one of the few places my parents let us spend the night.
Okay.
We couldn't spend a lot. And then the Morris household too, Joshua. So the Larry household, we could spend the night. The Morris, there weren't a lot of other places we could go. There weren't a lot of other places we could go, but your house was one of those houses that they felt was safe for us.
And it was the same thing with us. I mean, we felt very confident in sending our children over to, the Harris household, the Morris household, because we knew the parents.
Right.
I grew up, me and your dad, we grew up together, so to speak, and my wife and your mom, and the same thing here. Me and your dad, best of buddies, so just that village thing that we talk about from time to time, and that's what it took for our families and for you guys to be what you are today. That village, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, real quick, 1 minute for each of you all. What would you say is the greatest joy of fatherhood?
I think just seeing that expression on my son's face, man. I go pick him up from daycare.
Yeah.
He's on the playground playing with the other kids. Right. And he'll see me come through that door from across the playground, and he'll just scream, "Daddy!" Yeah. And he'll stop everything he's doing, and he takes off, beeline straight to me and hug me. That's priceless, man. That's priceless, especially when, a lot of kids are not afforded that, because fathers are just not present, man.
Right. Yeah.
And just being able to be that for my son, that's priceless. That's a different type of joy.
Yeah. Joshua, what would you say?
Definitely, I'm going to agree with Quentin. The affection is phenomenal. It's top of the line, because you can't even get that affection nowhere else in the world, where it's so pure and it's innocent and it's real. It's unconditional.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is great joy for me is seeing my children cheerfully self-initiate positive impact in their relationships and add value to others. Just seeing them go around and do things that's meaningful and connect with other people, being kind, act of kindnesses that they do from their own heart because of what we've been teaching them. Right.
Yeah.
That is very meaningful for me.
Awesome. And I'm piling on, but I gotta agree with you, man. Is picking them up, and then the other thing is hearing him say "Daddy," or if I come in the house, I'm coming in the back door and he's in the kitchen and he sees me, the look on his face, right? Man, And then the act of actually picking him up and giving, saying, give me a hug, son. Right. Before bed, we have this ritual, read him a book. Sorry, give daddy a hug. And then the squeeze, man,
it's priceless.
Yeah, you can't. That's one of the best hugs in the world. Absolutely. Right there. How has your profession, so when I say your profession, right, Quinn the educator, Joshua, you've been involved in military background, law enforcement, now a therapist, clinical therapist. Brother Larry, I know you, for many years, worked with the CTA, and you saw a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm curious, how has your profession influence your lens of fatherhood?
Well, with me, I think it's just the opposite. I think fatherhood, it helped me in my profession, because there were things that I would teach my children, about, sharing, being patient with one another, being courteous to one another, and so now. Working for the Chicago Transit Authority, and then I worked the last 12 years for Chicago Public Schools. I worked security for the Chicago Public Schools, so I dealt with children, and I've been retired now for the last 7-8 years. And so the things that I told my children to do, well, when I came to work, I had to model those things because that was the first thing that came to my mind. Well, you told your child that you have to be patient with your brother. Yeah. Now here it is, someone on your job. You got to be patient with that person. You teach them to be courteous. So now you're on your job. So now you have to be courteous to that person that you're dealing with. So with me, it was just the opposite. I think because I was that 9-to-5 guy that you talked about. So my thing with raising a family, my thing was always, and I'm kind of, the old school. And that's what it was back in those days. Right. I did my job, and after I did my job, I came home to my family. So my family took priority over the job. So again, so I think it worked just in the opposite. What I taught my children, I had to model it on the job or in my profession.
Got it.
Integrity. That's awesome.
Wow. Quinn, what would you say?
For me, man, I think one of the things, the benefit of education is you kind of get to see the other side of the picture. A lot of times we forget, like in daycare and in school, we're handing our child off to somebody else for 40 to 50 hours a week. That's a lot of time when you consider that they're going to sleep another 50 or so hours a week. And so you have to be very intentional about, one, getting to know the person who's on who has that 40 to 50 hours. Because they are probably, outside of the mom and the dad, they're probably the person who knows your child the most after us. And to really, it has helped me see that when he goes into school, I am going to have to be very intentional about how I'm communicating with those teachers, seeing what the needs of my child are, even understanding what's happening in the classroom. That has really shaped, as far as my profession, how I need to raise my child, as well as kids are not coming to school ready to learn anymore. A school is not an extension of parenthood. You bring your child to school to learn, and children are not getting the foundation that they need to come to school prepared.
Now,
to learn.
when you say that, what do you mean? Like when you say foundation, like what exactly do you mean?
Just for one, discipline.
Okay.
I need to make sure that come kindergarten or whatever that may be, that my child is able to sit down, he's able to follow directions, that he's able to do what he knows he's supposed to do, so he can learn. If that is my responsibility as a father and as a parent, to make sure that he's prepared. It's not the teacher's responsibility to get him there. He needs to come prepared already. A lot of children are not showing up prepared, and it just shows that there's a lack of intentionality in how they're being parented at home.
Got it.
And so that through my professional lens, that's one of the things that I'm bringing into my fatherhood.
Got it.
Wow.
Got it. What about you, brother?
I just like being a marriage and family counselor. So, I see families and couples regularly. And I would say one of the things is being in a profession, I'm constantly educating myself and learning new information. And I would say that education, sometimes I'm privileged to get it, right? So it helps me in my growth. But at the same time, it can become a problem because I can become too critical of myself. Because I'm taking in the knowledge like a fire hose, and I still have to be patient with my learning curve to recognize my learning curve is not necessarily keeping up with my knowledge intake. And so I have to be patient with myself and recognize, even though I learned this volume of knowledge about how brains work and how you can grow, I still have to be patient. I'm a human. I'm in the process. So I still have to give myself time to grow and be patient with that process.
Got it. I'll say for me, as someone like you that works with people for a living, the lens it puts on fatherhood is I realize how delicate parenthood is and the impact it has on a child and how they see the world, how they develop, and how their unconscious ways of being developed based on who my wife and I are for my son. And so I think that's always in the back of my mind in terms of who I'm being as a father, how I'm showing up for him. I'm always thinking about that. But then it also gives me a different level of grace for myself, knowing that, hey, man, there are a lot of people who I've worked with as a coach who they say, I love my parents. I have great parents. And then we still can distinguish something that, they're dealing with that came from how their parents raised them. Because their parents are human beings. Right. And they're imperfect people. So the other part that has given me is a certain level of grace for what I may not have and what I may not be able to do. That I can bring into parenthood and fatherhood, etc. But more than anything, I think it helps me watch my son. I'm very observant of my son. And I think that's the lens that my profession is a profession of observation, much like yours, and listening. And he's not that much of a talker yet. But when he begins talking more, I think that one of the things I'll be doing is just listening. Right? Like, man, okay, what is he really saying here? How is he really expressing himself? And that goes to something you shared on one of the lessons to teach my son. I think part 1, you called in. Okay. And you talked about how most young men, the reason they're so angry is because they can't express themselves emotionally. And even already, my son, a terrible twos when the tantrums and all that, I'm letting him know, like, he wants more water and the cup is empty. You know, instead of saying more, please, which he knows how to say now, he'll toss the cup across the room, right?
You got the message.
Right, yeah. He'll, you know, it's like, hey, come here, man. Look, you can get it faster by saying more, please, and having that conversation.
Yeah.
And just really, and then, you know, and say more, please, right? Being patient with them and watching that. So that's something that for me is going to be that I'm looking through that lens in terms of my fatherhood. What would you all say your take is on teaching your child to protect themselves physically, right, emotionally, and mentally? What would you say your take on that is? Let's start with you, Quinn.
Well, I'll say the physical part, obviously, is still a work in progress. I have had a few opportunities to see him go through conflict and what he will do. But I think at this point for me is more so the emotional and the mental. So when I think about protection from the emotional standpoint, it goes back to what you're saying as far as the expression. When he does throw that tantrum, you know, just working with him, you know, getting him to express himself. He's still learning how to use his words. I say that all the time. Use your words.
Use your words. Yeah.
Use your words.
I hear you telling that all the time.
Oh yeah, all the time. Use your words. You know how to speak. You know, let's not scream. Use your words. And getting him used to having a safe place to express himself. That's huge. From the mental piece, just being very careful about what I allow him to be exposed to. So, I mean, perfect example, what I listen to in the car, for example. You know, there's times when, you know, I'm by myself, you know, the music may not be edited. But when Wesley's in the car, you know what I'm saying, that's not what I'm playing. You know, I'm making sure that what he's taking in is something that if it comes back out, it's going to be edifying. It's something that we used to say, it needs to be edifying. And so that's from the mental perspective, just protecting what he's taking in, what he sees on TV. Even games that I play. You know what I mean? Like making sure, like, hey, you know, I know this scene coming up or something that's getting ready to happen. Like, hey, Wesley, go do this. You know what I mean? And so just really being careful about what you allow them to have access to, because it'll affect them.
Absolutely.
So I think those two, the physical part will start to gradually come more and more, kind of like you could get to that 5-6 year old age where you know they need to be able to stand up and protect themselves. But the good thing for Wesley is he's advanced and he hangs out. He's already in preschool with the 3-year-olds, so all the boys are bigger than him. So he's naturally just going to have to get tougher. And so he's in a good space for that.
Got it. I'll go next. We'll just go by age of children. Okay. How about that? So for me, in terms of physical protection, I think my wife and I both learned quickly that Legend will hold his own. Right? Like that, you know, he got it from one of us, but, you know, already at the age of 2, you can't push him around. His older cousin, you know, he'll jump on his older cousin's back. I'm like, hey, man, look, he's a lot bigger than you. You're going to have to slow down, all right? But, you know, all the wrestling we've done, I think, is giving him too much of it. But in terms of the mental protection, I'm really, really careful with symbolism. I mean, all the way down to, you know, the little cartoons he watches on YouTube. I want them to be diverse, not monogamously white, where, you know, one day he wakes up like, I'm black, like, you know, like, no. So, I mean, he's watching, I mean, I literally, when we first started watching, first started watching cartoons, like Google black baby cartoons on YouTube to make sure that he was watching, you know, cartoons and children that look like him. So when the live children come on, the human children come on, they're black children, right? The cartoon is a little black girl, a little black boy, and they're running around. And then, you know, some of the other ones are animated, maybe animals. And then every now and then there's white people. And we try to do it within the same frame of his life, right? There are diverse children around him and white people around him. And so there's nothing wrong with him watching that, but that's not going to be the only thing, right? In terms of his mental inputs, very, very careful with that. In terms of just being really, really intentional about what he's watching. And then emotionally, you know, the one thing I've learned about in terms of my reading is that age between 1 and 3 is when they need love. I mean, that has a lot to do with how they develop. And so in terms of protection right now, is that it's just the emotional protection, making sure that he knows that no matter what happens, he's loved. He goes into timeout, he's in trouble. He gets a spanking, whatever it might be, you're loved. You're loved, right? And so you just got in trouble, but now come here, give dad a hug. You know, I love you. Yeah. I do love you. All right. And then he's good. We're good. And he goes and does what he's supposed to do. Sure. But that's in terms of emotional protection, making sure that my wife and I both know that we love you. Yep. You are loved. Yeah. Absolutely. Josh, what about you, man?
Well, I guess we'll start with the physical. When it comes to the physical protection, that's just, of course, their development.
Yeah.
Physical training. So my kids have a physical fitness regimen that they have to attend to.
I love that.
You know what I mean? So,
love that.
And early on, martial arts.
Yeah.
So these are ways that we, teach and empower them in their physical protection. And then that's going to graduate as they move. We talk about developmentally. So eventually they'll get to things such as weapons training. So eventually we'll get there, and that'll range from pepper spray for my daughter. It'll range all the way from pepper spray to weapons training. Me and my wife both certified with weapons. I taught my wife how to shoot. She has a gun. So that's the high end of the spectrum. But
so share why, because Quinn and I both, when we have toddlers, I think we both share the same view. In terms of, both of us can use a weapon. We're both weapons trained. Actually, one of the things I think might be happening today, I might have gave it away. Right. This is man getting together, right? But why is that important to you?
The physical training aspect, totally.
Even them knowing how to operate and work a weapon, because I'm sure there are people out there who are like, oh my, right?
Right. And I think that your perspective on those types of things, a lot of that I think is based in people's experiences, right?
And so former military, law
so you're talking about a guy who's been around weapons his whole life, adult life. So I'm very comfortable in that space. And I think that, and of course, my children are developing mentally. They have a mental and spiritual program that they have to attend to. So as I'm developing their mind to understand how life goes, how precious life is, and things of that nature, then at the same time, I'm going to teach them how to defend themselves, right, and protect themselves. But they have a sacredness for life, so they're not going to be some rogue person out here doing something that's irresponsible.
So what I hear you saying is teaching them how to defend themselves. Worst case scenario, they can defend themselves, but at the same time, knowing that life is precious, and this is absolutely not something you want to do.
Right.
I fully agree with that. And I know in terms of being a weapons owner, I know my mom. The first time she found out, she was why you? And I said, well, number one, we have the right. And number two, the idea is never to ever have to use it. Part one of the show, I came in, I talked about a gentleman who was, trying to rob my neighbor's car. And I said, hey man, what are you doing? Right. And somebody in the stream said, man, you should have pulled that pistol out and told him, and I'm like, no, that's not necessary. Right. Because, that's not what it's for. It's for when my home is under attack, or my family is under attack, and that's the last resort, right? That is the absolute last resort of protection as a man, right? So just know, you're not, something goes down, the electric grid goes out, the Harris household is ready. Right. I think that's part of the responsibility I have as a man. Right. Is to make sure that at the end of the day, if it goes crazy, I can protect my family.
I know, that's right.
Right. Yeah. Now, we're not running around and gun toting at all. Right. But I appreciate that. Thank you for that, man.
Absolutely. Fort Harris.
Literally Fort Harris, man. I've thought of these things. I told my brother we got the wood
boards,
panels,
yeah.
wood boards.
Yeah.
So if we gotta, drill them into the windows so people can't break through the windows, we'll do that.
Right.
But my thought is, how do I protect my family? As a coach, if I'm thinking futuristic in terms of investment, I'm thinking futuristic in terms of, my son's life and his legacy and trust and wills. I also have to think futuristic in terms of his protection.
Yeah.
And my wife's protection as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Brother Larry.
Okay, well, I guess starting with the physical, my daughter, I have a daughter, she's a high school teacher, and she's teaching in the inner city. And, she's talking with her students, and she tells the students, well, I've never been in a fight in my whole life. It's like 37, 36, and the children, oh, no, Mrs. Larry, you were in a fight. She said, no. She said, the way you teach us, I know you have been in a fight.
Right.
But, that's her testimony, that she's never been in a fight.
That's beautiful.
And so what I've tried to teach them coming up was that, mind your business. And see, a lot of people will have respect for you if you just mind your own business.
That was huge.
Yeah,
Hashtag mind your business.
Mind your business.
We'll keep you out of a lot of trouble.
We'll keep you out of a lot of trouble.
Yes, sir.
And,
Absolutely.
and
That's
especially
huge.
with the girls. And then even with my sons, there have been times when, I remember one son came to me, he was having a little problem at school, and he told me, he said, this guy's harassing me. He said, he want my lunch money. I said, well, here's the thing. I said, I can come up to the school and deal with that. He's in 3rd or 4th grade. Or you can deal with it. Which one would you prefer? I said, well, I can deal with it. You don't have to come up there and say, well, this is what you do. When he comes up to you and say, it's kind of like what you had just described about, knowing, taking your stand on something. When he comes up to you, just let him know, hey, look, I'm not giving you anything. And it worked just like I said. He told the boy, the boy came up, sure enough, because he came home. Now I'm on pins and needles at work. What happened, you know what I mean? And he comes home, they said, what happened? He said, Daddy, he came up to me, and he said, hey, where's the money? And he says, I'm not giving you anything. And he said, the boy kind of looked at him and took off the other way. So, I've taught them, I've taught them to stand your ground. Mind your business and stand your ground.
That's beautiful.
That's
beautiful.
And then that's then we talk about the emotional part. And, I try to teach them, don't let people get in your head. You understand? Don't let people control you. You understand? Have appreciation for who you are. And so I think I've done a pretty good job of just letting them know, hey, mind your business. Make sure that you do what you're supposed to do as an individual. And even as an adult now, I'm the last one. There's nobody living with me now but me and my wife and my son. But I'm the last one who goes to bed at night. I'm the one who's checking the windows, making sure that the windows are locked. I'm the one putting the double locks on as a man. And then I try to teach my children the same thing. Before you need a designated person who's going to be there to make sure that those things are done. And that's why it's so important for men to be in their home to monitor their children. You understand? To go behind them sometime and make sure that door, when you ask them, is the door locked? Oh, yeah, it's locked, Dad. Okay, let me just double check here.
Because it's not really locked.
It's not really locked, you know what I mean? But then you hope that at some point that they will start picking up some of these things, you know what I mean? As far as the emotional part, the physical part, that, they'll learn that you're responsible for making certain things happen in your life, and you take yourself out of situations that may cause people to have to, how can I put this, to try you emotionally.
I want to add, I want to piggyback off of something here real quick. And another piece of protection that kind of encompasses, I think, all three of these is, especially in today's time, is making sure that our children are culturally competent. I think that that's very important. They need to understand how to maneuver, when to maneuver, what to do, what not to do, how to speak, how not to speak, depending on the circumstances and the environment that they are in. And I think that is a huge piece of protection today that people know, but they don't know. And I think that you have to be get ahead of that. And so, and it starts at little pieces at different ages. And just kind of understand, like, hey, you may feel a way about a certain thing, but you have to address it a certain way. You know what I mean? You have to make sure that you're politically correct, so to speak, in how you address certain things. And I think that that's very important, especially with young black men.
And I'll add to that, knowing your truth, but also understanding, like being clear on the outcome you want on the other side.
Yeah.
So I know my truth,
Right.
Yep.
right? And I know who I am, but I also know how I want this to end, right? And so what I hear you saying is teaching your son or teaching your children how to choose wisdom.
Yep.
And sometimes, like I feel this way, but I also know if I go this way, it might not end right. And so I want this to end right.
Yep.
And so let me go ahead and just say this so that way I can walk away.
Exactly.
I think you start to learn that as a man.
Yeah.
Because as you know, when I was Josh, remember this, I think we both were in college a little, we'd be quick to throw down. Very quick if somebody tried us.
Right.
But then as you get older, there's some things where I've been called out my name.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of standing, I'm looking at this person like, man, you don't even know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right. And I walk away.
Yes, absolutely.
I walk away. And I love what you said. Mind your business.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you know, and kind of to certify what you just said, I've seen it happen with you and your brother Ethan. And we were in a gym playing basketball, and Ethan and Linal would lighten the guys up. Right?
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
They would lighten the guys up. And then they had a couple of new guys who would come to the church, right? And the church, they teach you be humble, but they were new, so they were kind of mouthy. They were like, "Oh man, you guys, y'all can't play so and so." But I watched them, and I think what happened was, I think Linal said, "There's Brother Larry over there. Don't let me say nothing. I'm gonna be cool here, but I'm gonna just have to show this guy on the basketball court what I can do." So I saw you model that. I saw you model the teaching that you had received from your parents, from the church, and and his dad and mom were there. But I was there like, nah, Brother Larry, I'm gonna be cool. I can have it if I wanted to.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Love that. I think that's a good segue into legacy, because what you talked about was, the legacy before you, kind of what created what happened before you.
Right.
And so here we are as men, and we have an opportunity to have an impact on our ancestors. And, you already have grandchildren, and I believe you'll be blessed to see your great-grandchildren. So those are, in many ways, that's your lineage and the blessing of your lineage, and hopefully we all have that same opportunity, Joshua, Quinn, and I. For you all, what does legacy mean to you all as fathers? Like when you think of legacy, what comes to mind?
Legacy for me is two parts. First is the financial aspect of legacy, and the second part would be, so I would break legacy into two things, tangible and intangible. Okay. Tangible is the financial pieces, the life insurance, things like that, real estate, what you leave your children behind or your grandchildren behind. And then the other part would be the intangible. That's the wisdom you leave them, the knowledge you leave them, the values, the family culture you leave them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those are the two parts. And I'm like I'm sure all of us, or you two, he's already done it. We're trying to build that legacy now. So I'm in the process of building that. So on the financial aspect, you got to build it for the physical things, the property, I think a fundamental starting point for that is life insurance.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
absolutely.
That's I think Nipsey Hussle, that's one of those things to me he demonstrated at a high level when he passed was, may he rest in peace, was leaving a financial legacy for his children, because people started doing crowdfunding, and I saw an article from TMZ where they turned all of it down and said we don't need the money. Yeah. He left a financial legacy for his children. They're secure for the rest of their lives. I think that I think that was innovative how he handled that, and that's
the way it's supposed to be handled. I think as a man, and I'll tell you, there's been some patriarch men in our community who have passed away that I respected deeply, and then to see a GoFundMe go up for them and to bury them, and they left their family in financial straits. It to me was a blemish on their legacy, and that's something that I just won't have. Right. You do all this work, and then something happens to me, and y'all got to go fund me for Pam and Legend. No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
That's outstanding.
Right. So I think I love that Nipsey did it because I believe that many of us, see that.
We haven't,
And a lot of brothers saw that. And I hope they not just watching and say, oh, that's dope, but they go do something about it and say, you know what? I want to leave my family off the same way. I love that, man. The tangible and intangible parts of legacy. That's phenomenal. Quinn, what about you?
When I think about a legacy, I think about a gift. And so when I think about my father, one of the gifts that he left me was a trade. I have a skill set. And Brother Larry, you can attest to this. Over 10 years ago, I did some paint work for you. And believe it or not, just this past fall, somebody reached out to me and said, you know what? Brother Larry said you did some good work for him.
That's right.
And you Morris Harris' son, so it's got to be in your genetic code.
Right.
He was like, I don't want nobody else to do this work for me. I want you to do it. You know what I'm saying? And that trade has carried me through times when I didn't have anything else. I was like, you know what? Well, at least I have this to fall back on. There was a time I was in between work. Hopped on Craigslist. Oh, you need a painter tradesman? The guy hired me the same day. You know what I'm saying? And so that is something that my father left to me that has carried me, and I've made a lot of money doing that work. And so I look at it from that same perspective of I want to be able to leave Wesley something that he can take, you know what I'm saying, and be able to use that to propel him to the next level. Whether it may not be a physical trade, but just to show up and say, are you Quentin Harris's son? Are you from good stock? Yeah, we're going to give you this opportunity. Or we're going to do this because of the legacy that your father had. And so that's how I look at it.
That's love. That's love. And man, let me tell you, I wouldn't be where I am without that from Dad. I mean, the ability to go into a building and you've seen some of the build. Both of you all have seen some of the buildings I've transformed with your help, with you all's help. But that came from Dad. And it's one of those things that let's say the work as a coach dries up. I always know that I can put my hands to something and make some money and take care of my family. Like they're going to eat. Right. They're going to eat. That's beautiful, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Larry, what about you?
Yeah, and just to go back a little bit, I talked about, fathers who need to apologize to their sons, you know, and that's so true. But sometimes even, and I'll get to legacy in a minute, but sometimes sons have to be at the point with their dad say, hey, you know what, this dad didn't do what he's supposed to do. Let me reach out to him. You know, you may have some people in the audience right now who like, I don't have anything to do with my dad. My dad was the worst person in the world. If you still have a living dad, reach out to him. Yeah. You know, if your dad is still here, he may have been the worst customer around, but reach out to him and let him know, hey, look, you know, you might even ask for forgiveness, but I forgive you. I love you.
Believe that.
Yeah. So we have to do that because when we hold those things, I know a great man once told you put acid in a container, all it's going to do is eat the container. It's going to eat its way out. So, hey, let it be known. Hey, Dad, you know, you wronged me, but you know what? I forgive you. Dealing with legacy, I believe that you should, as a father, make sure you leave a legacy for your children. May it be financially, may it be through something that you can teach them. I was in a class the other day talking about trust funds. And many people, they have wills, but they don't. It's not in a trust. So if you put it in a will, it still has to go to probate court.
That's right.
But if you put it in a trust fund, then the trust fund dictates. You have a trustee who tells where everything should go. So I believe that as parents, we should make sure that we leave a financial legacy.
Absolutely.
May it be real estate, where at some point they can liquidate it and make it, you know, something that they can use financially. But these are things that we should leave for our children.
Yep.
Also, we should leave some kind of attitude of survival with them. That's my opinion. How you can, teach them to be humble. Teach them to love people. Teach them to respect.
Yeah.
So it's on both sides.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Love that. Love that. And so it's interesting that the trust came up, you know, in terms of legacy. Life insurance came up in terms of legacy. I love what you said at the end there around just being humble and loving people. Here's what I would add on. is when you think about, so my wife and I, we've executed a trust and will and all that.
Right.
There are a lot of moving parts, man.
Yeah.
And Nipsey in particular, he didn't fund his trust. So the trust is in place, but it's not funded. And so the family still there's still some court work that has to be done. Now, it's nothing like if he didn't have the trust, right? But then I thought to myself, like, man, because there's a lot of moving parts.
Right.
And I'm like, did we fund our trust? And I mean, you know, when this happened to Nipsey, right? I'm like, did we fund our trust? I'm like, you know what? So one of them is funded. The other one isn't.
Okay.
I need to get on that, right?
Right.
And so that's because we have multiple trusts. They're broken up in certain ways to make sure, you know, everything's handled. And so the other thing I would say is part of legacy, I'm telling myself this right now, is, man, you got to constantly be thinking about legacy.
Yes.
Constantly be thinking about legacy. Because I think it's one of those things that in the throes of life and going to work and coming back and all those type of things, it can fall off and you can say, well, I'll do it tomorrow. And then something happens to you and your legacy is gone. And so, man, powerful. John, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. Happy Father's Day to you all. You guys are...
Oh, boy.
You guys are incredible.
No,
I'm going to be real quick. I got a 3-part question for you all.
All right.
First question. We come in contact with so many Black American men who are very, very young and who are looking to go into starting a family and taking on the responsibility of fatherhood. In your opinion, what age, or if not age, at what point do you think a male in the Black community in particular, this is very huge, should even talk about even looking at being in the position of being a father? Okay, that's question one.
Well, let's deal with that one first. Let's deal with that one. We got to get through them quick because we only got a few minutes left on the show.
I was going to hang up, but you can go ahead.
No. Stay on the line, John. By the way, for listeners, this is Joshua's brother, John Morris. But I think this is yeah. You didn't know the voice? I knew the voice right away. Yeah.
Hey, happy Father's Day, bro.
Yeah, happy Father's Day,
Father's
man.
Day, young man.
I'll share my opinion. I don't believe a man should get married until, one, he knows his purpose on the planet. Right. Like, he's very clear on his purpose, and he's taking action in that purpose. That's first. Second, until he really knows himself. And for men, that's going to be different ages. I don't know that I can say there's a particular age. Yeah. But what I will say is that if a man doesn't know himself, it's going to be hard for him to create a stable ground with a woman. And if he doesn't have a purpose to lean on in terms of who he's going to be with that woman, it's going to be very difficult for him to be
powerful.
I mean, that's mine. And for women listening, like, to me, that's one of the first questions you ask on a date of a man. You know, not how much money he got or what kind of job. Like, what's your purpose?
Wow.
What's your purpose on the planet? And then for a man, he has to know, I didn't get married till I was 38 years old. That was the right time for me.
Right.
Because if my wife had met me 5 years before that or 10 years before that, Quentin and Josh already know. I mean, I would have blew that up. I would have completely messed that up, right? So, I mean, I don't know if you guys have something you would add to that, but to me, that's my answer.
I'll add, from a physiological standpoint, the brain isn't fully developed till between ages of 26 to 30, and later for men than women. Matter of fact, some experts now have expanded the adolescent age range to be from 13 to 26. So a lot of insurance now will let you carry your children, well into their 20s, because we've understood now that there is still some developmental things lacking in the brain in the early 20s. So I would say, if I had to put an age on it, which I agree with you, Linal, really it's not a set age per se, but if I had to put an age range, I would say on the early side, 30 years old would probably be a good place to start for being a leader, because now, at least from a physiological standpoint, hopefully the frontal lobe of your brain is fully developed and you can reflect better and work on your self-awareness can be better. And therefore, you can start being able to do those complex leadership things.
I'll agree with that, and I'll say this real quick. That was basically right around the age that I had Wesley. He was 30 years old. while I could have had him at an earlier age and I would have been responsible and I would have did what I had to do, it would have came at a much higher price.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I just was not there. I wasn't ready. Still learning myself, man. You know, and I would not have had the mental capacity to give him everything that I could have at this point. So I agree.
Wow. Well, you know, that's a very hard question for me because I came up in a different time.
Yeah, different era.
Yeah, different era. And, you know, I got married at 23 years old. Me and my wife, we just celebrated 44 years of marriage last week. June 12th.
Wow.
We did 44
Congratulations.
years.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And so, but yeah,
44. I'm on my 4th year.
44, you know.
44.
And so, you know, I came up in a time when your folks didn't have much, you know what I mean? We didn't have a TV and we didn't have a whole lot of stuff. We didn't have a phone in the house.
Right.
And so I could not wait to get out on my own, you know. And I wanted to start a family, you know, and that's what we did. I wasn't, I guess, career oriented. I knew I had to have a good job if I had a family, and that's what I did. I went and got, and the same thing with folks like your dad. We knew back in that generation, you needed a good job to have a family. Your dad worked for ComEd. You know, your dad worked for United, you know, Airlines. So it was a different time. But in this day and time, people are staying home a lot longer. You know, you got people that's 25, 30, still living at home with mom and dad, and they're comfortable with that. So I'm not sure what the age should be right now. Again, it gets down to the individual. There's some 23-year-olds who maybe were, I probably doubt very few, that was like me that wanted to start a family at 23. So it may be pushed back now.
Can I add one thing to what he's saying?
Yep.
Two, I think, like back then, you could come straight out at 18 and you could get a job whereby you could take care of a family. You know, that's harder to come by these days. You know, there's some more training usually you're going to have to do to be able to have a career where you financially have a sufficient income to take care of a family.
And different times because, you know, I work for CTA. I worked for them for 25 years. I've been retired from them for 20 years. Wow. You know, and so I've gotten more money on retirement than I actually made when I was working. So it's a different time altogether. So, and I guess you got to take all those dynamics and look at
consideration. All right. That's the answers to question number 1. What's the biggest lesson you want to teach your children? Like if there was one lesson that, you know, when you leave the face of the earth, you want to make sure they know. What would that lesson be? I'll go first. Okay. Because I think my audience knows as you all are thinking about it.
Right.
Purpose. Right. Right? Everybody, whoa, shock. That's a shock. Right. But, I mean, Legend, I think I want him to know the power of purpose, how important purpose is in his life. And that, you know, if he truly wants to live a fulfilled life, that he needs to be aligned with his purpose. That's the number one lesson I want to make sure he gets. What about the rest of you?
Mine is real quick. To be unapologetically you.
Yeah,
I think that's the first one. It's to definitely don't be sorry for being who you are. Yeah, right. That's the first lesson I want him to learn. If you want something, go get it. If you don't know how to go get it, you find somebody who does, and you sit and you learn from them until you're ready. Yeah, and the last thing is just to be a bold man of integrity.
Love it. I love that. All right.
Yeah, just respect God and keep his spiritual laws. That's the number one lesson for my children.
That's good.
Make sure you learn that because that God is the reason why I'm here today. Sure. It's the reason why all of the blessings that I have, that I do have. So respect God and put him first and love others.
Love that. Love that.
And it's mine's same, similar to Quentin's. You know, don't follow the crowd. Be who you are. You understand? And accept who you are. Be the best person that you can possibly be. You know, one of my daughters, she taught me this. She says that you are the sum of your friends, and so watch who you associate yourself with. You know, if you're going to be with positive people, don't hang out with folks that's not about doing anything. You know, it's all right to talk baseball and basketball, but don't let that be your whole life and your whole conversation. Baseball and basketball, and how much this player is making, and how much that player is making. How much are you making? What are you doing?
What are your numbers? What are your stats?
Absolutely. So if I could leave something with them, girls and boys, that's what I would leave them.
Man. Well, hey, this has been phenomenal. I want to thank you all for coming in the studio.
Thank you
this
for
morning,
having me.
getting up. Yeah. And, speaking of basketball, Brother Larry, we can't, we got 4 men around the table and, a lot has happened in the NBA finals.
Right.
And this is how I think it should be as men, right? We spent 2 hours talking about life. Yes. Let's spend 5 minutes talking about basketball.
Oh,
Yeah, right? I mean, why not? I think as men, we want to talk about life more than we talk about these other things.
Absolutely.
But since we are together,
right.
The ratio is right, though.
What about the ratio? Hopefully they take an example of the ratio, but what do you think of the finals?
Kawhi.
The finals was great, man. Unfortunately, you hate to see players go down. I was really hurt about Klay Thompson, and I thought Durant should have just stayed seated.
Yep.
But shouts to Toronto, man. Shouts to Fred VanVleet from Rockford.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Rockford,
Yeah,
really?
he's
from Rockford, man.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
I know I have a lot of old college teammates who are from Rockford who are affiliated with the VanVleet family.
Okay.
And so, Rockford is really, really excited about that. He went to Rockford Auburn, which is in the hood out there.
Yeah.
And so he aspired. He was an inspiration to that community like nothing else. I mean, that's a dream of every young boy. Man, I wanna go to the NBA, and he was able to accomplish something. His story is phenomenal. Yes. I mean, 6 feet. Everybody said he was too small. The last pickup, 14th man on the roster.
Wow.
Look at him, 12 points.
Yeah. Shows in. Real quick, one last thing. AD to the Lakers. Are they in the finals next year? Yes or no?
The Lakers in the finals?
Yeah. Yes or no?
If AD go?
No.
He's there.
No.
Oh, I didn't.
No. Yes or no?
I say yeah.
Yeah?
I would say yeah.
I don't know.
You don't know?
I'm not
Vegas thinks so.
Yeah.
The odds are Milwaukee Bucks, LA Lakers. Hey, you guys been listening to Inspirational Perspective. This is your life coach, Linal Harris. Happy Father's Day to the fathers. I hope you enjoyed. This is a phenomenal broadcast. Share it with other people. You can go to Facebook and listen to it again. And as always, stay inspired. It's a lifestyle choice. Happy Father's Day. All right, well, we got a phone call real quick. Let's take this phone call. Mr. C on line 1. Let's go to Mr. C. Good morning. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, Linal Harris? This is Eric Cosby, Mr. C.
Oh, yeah. How you doing? Happy Father's Day.
Thank you, sir. Hey, happy Father's Day to James Larry there. And
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I got a thought, brother. I was thinking about Proverbs 17:6 says, "The glory of children are their fathers."
Yeah.
And I was thinking, Brother Larry, he brought out a powerful point that's so important for children to be our children, the fathers to be in the home.
Yes.
And there was a statistic that I read that 90% of homeless children come from fatherless homes.
Wow. 90%?
Wow.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
It was very astounding when I heard it too.
Wow.
90%, and matter of fact, they said 90% of homeless children and runaway children come from fatherless homes.
Wow.
90%. So, I'm just, want to emphasize the importance of fathers. It's true that the glory of children are their fathers, and I thank God for my father. My mother and father divorced, but my father chose to stick it out on the same block with my mother. And then my brother was talking about that today and how we appreciated our father. He said he wanted to make sure that all his children become responsible children. There was 7 of us. And to this day, we were just talking about this morning, all of us are independent, responsible, children.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So with that thought, I'm going to leave that with you guys.
Man,
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
You too. Yeah. All right. Let's go to line 2. Line 2. Miss Jones, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. Happy Father's Day to all you men out there.
Thank you.
Linal, real quickly, you don't have to answer first because I want to get my most of my time into the baby boom over there.
Okay.
But I don't think you mentioned what your fondest memories of your dad are.
Oh, yeah, I started the show with it. I did start the show with it.
Did you tell us? Oh, I'm sorry.
I did. It actually included Brother James Larry, as well, because he was with my dad when I had that fondest memory down in southern Illinois. We were camping and fishing and all those things.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah.
Mr. Larry James, is it?
James Larry.
Thank you so much for being there. I'm a boomer too.
Okay.
And I listened to what you said about your dad, and I kind of felt that myself. And so my question for you has to do with the state of mind of men who were before the boomers. Did it have much to do with poverty and or the fact that they may have lost their parents in the war, or they had to go to the war themselves? My dad personally was kind of like a rolling stone. He had many wives and a lot of children by different women. And he couldn't spread himself as thin as he wanted to. And so there was a lot of challenges for all of his children. And yet we still had that same, when we were smaller, we didn't like him because he wasn't there.
Right.
As we wanted him to, and he couldn't because he couldn't be in 5 or 10 households at the same time.
Right.
But I wanted to know if your father may have gone to the war, or did his dad go to the war? Did they see a lot of violence? We know that we didn't have a lot of black television, and the little that we did have didn't come till we were grown and gone. But all those things have a major impact, and I just want to thank each and every one of you. This is a great show. As soon as I get back on Facebook right now, you know I'm sharing this.
Okay, all right.
Thank you all so much.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you for the phone call.
Yeah, I think she hit the nail on the head with my dad. My dad was born in 1923, and his parents were born in the 1800s. And he was the youngest of 6 or 7 siblings. And by the time he was 7 or 8 years old, he had lost both parents. And so he was raised by, his older brother. And so what my mom would do on a regular basis, she would tell us, she would say, hey, you know what, your dad, he's the way he is because he didn't have a mom and dad. And so he didn't know how it should have been modeled, how a loving household should be. And so when he got with my mom, well, he didn't know anything about how to raise children. And so a lot of that fell on us. We're looking for a good dad, and we didn't get that because he didn't know how.
Got it.
You know, and even to this day, I look at, especially young African American men, we need training how to be fathers. See, one of the reasons why I came to the church was because I actually saw myself being the kind of dad that my father was. And I say, hey, this is not working. This ain't working at all. I have to get with some people that can teach me something.
How to be a better father.
Yes, sir. And then when I came to the church, I saw it. I saw it modeled, man, like you wouldn't believe.
Wow.
You know, I saw husbands being affectionate openly to their wives.
Yes,
I saw fathers sitting down talking with their children. And I said, that's what I want right there.
Awesome.
And so that's what enabled me to become that father that I actually wanted to be. But going back to your caller, she nailed it. He did not have the training that he needed to be a good father. So, and then I tell you callers and listeners today, hey, if you see you're lacking, get some help. There's help out there, you know, whether it be through the church or some kind of fatherhood organization. Reach out, get some help to be that father you want to be.
Got it. Love that. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Before we go to that last question, I got a phone call. Let's go to line 4 with John. Question number 2, brother. You still there?
This because I think a lot of men are starting families prematurely. I'm arresting them, and it's a problem. They need to think about this before they start having a child. Second question. Black legacy, which you've touched on. I've come in contact with huge, for example, the Barack Obama library is getting ready to be built.
Right.
There was no black contractor that could be able to build it and bond it by themselves. They brought in a white American contractor to do this. And they did it in joint with the compass of other black American contractors.
Okay.
I just think from a black legacy perspective, and I'm asking you, how do we start to get to the level of white America where they are? They have business, they've been in business 100 years.
Yeah, well,
200 years.
they got a head start on us, man. And you also have to remember that every time that we took any financial ground, that there was a covert effort to basically snatch the carpet from underneath our financial feet. And the latest of that was in 2008. And previous to 2008 were all the fraudulent bank loans they gave to African Americans. That we were getting charged more interest. And so I think there's two parts. One, there's a need for reparations. There's no doubt about it. There's a need for reparations because, one, as African Americans, we built this country in many ways for free. And then the consequence of having done that left us with deep levels of trauma. And then every time we seem to get over the trauma, then something else was done by the government, whether it was taking money out of Freedmen's Bank or the attacks that took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or these other places where there were riots and, black people who were building and had land and wealth. It was just snatched from them with force. And so here we are, and you have a question like that. And it's a legitimate question, but we have to remember that every time a black man or a group of black people have had some type of financial prosperity, it's been snatched from them. And for those of us who are middle class that have some kind of financial viability and stability, we're not securing our legacy. Right. We don't have the knowledge to secure our legacy, which is another thing that's perpetuating that. So I'll just call that the answer because we run out of time. What's the third question?
Last question is, one of the key elements that most people talk about is giving back. Mm-hmm. And in the black community and the fatherhood, what is the number one way to teach your kids, your family, about giving? That's the last question.
Got it. All right. That's a good question. Thank you, John, for the call. Happy Father's Day, brother.
Father's Day.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Bye. That was good questions. Mm-hmm. Okay. What was you giving back? What's you all's take on that?
Wow.
I shared that in one of my lessons, part 2 last week. But what would you all say about giving back?
I think you have to understand what it is that you have to give, and it goes back to the purpose question.
Yeah.
So I think as your child, as I've developed and understood what my purpose is, I know where I can give back. So I give back to the young black man in the community in whatever way that I can. And so as Wesley develops and he starts to understand what his talent is and what his purpose is and what his gift is, then with that, then he can identify where I can give back.
Yep.
And so I think that's something that will continue to evolve as he grows.
Yep. Got it.
Wow, that's phenomenal. I love that answer.
Well, as far as giving back, I think that, as black men, sometimes just striking up a conversation with a young black person, a young black man. I do a lot of walking, and sometimes when I'm walking, I encounter, African-American males, young guys in their teens, sometimes on their way to school. And I'll stop and I have a conversation with them about their life and what they plan to do with their life, and share with them my life and how I came up, in some cases just like you did, but I didn't stop. I looked for a higher power to help me to achieve a better life, or to get me away from something that was negative. So just sharing sometimes your story with someone that's younger than you, taking the time to share that story, is a way of giving back to, I guess, the community.
Love it.
Yeah.
I mean, the concept I shared last week was, a closed fist. You can't get anything out, but you can't get anything in.
Right.
And so it's a lesson I learned from my mom that when it comes to giving, you want to give.
Yeah.
Because the more you give, the more you can receive.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I firmly believe that. And I love your answer in terms of align with purpose.
Yeah,
align with purpose is extremely important.
Join Linal Harris every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. here on WVON 1690 AM.